So after 13 years, the sequel to the most successful film ever made, Avatar, is finally here. As the movie has taken so long to hit the big screen, the hype for it, I think with general moviegoers, has waned considerably, and living up to the expectations of matching the first film in terms of success and impact would be nearly impossible to achieve. With an estimated budget of close to $400 million, which covers the shooting of parts 2 and 3, and I believe a little bit of part 4, and of course the extensive CGI, it appears to be the most expensive film ever made, and will need to make huge numbers to make their money back, and for director James Cameron to continue his series. Since its release, the press have already given it a mixed response, with some giving it a high rating, praising its direction and visual effects, and others the complete opposite, complaining it's thunderously dull. So where do we find Jake in the way of water? The story picks up 10 years after the events of the first film. Sully lives as a chief and has raised a family with Neytiri, which includes his 2 sons and his daughters, with one of them adopted. She was born from Sigourney Weaver's characters in a Na'vi Avatar, and a feral boy named Spider has joined them. To the Na'vi's dismay, the Sky People, i.e. the humans, have returned to Pandora to colonise it, erecting a new main base, and this time they are after something different that is just as valuable. Among the new arrivals is the return of Colonel Miles, cloned as a Na'vi containing his memories that were uploaded before his death. Jake initiates a guerrilla campaign against the RDA supply lines, and discovers Colonel Miles is among them, and he knows he is after him, so Jake and his family flee into hiding to avoid more problems for the tribe, heading out to join the Reef People clan at Pandora's eastern seaboard, where they are given shelter. The family learns the ways of the Reef People, but they cannot hide for long, as Colonel Miles and his team are on their trail. The first Avatar came out 2 years before I even thought about running a YouTube channel, so I've never discussed my thoughts on it in any detail. It arrived when I was still a projectionist, and seeing it in 3D was amazing, but on home viewing it didn't quite have the same impact. I never had a huge problem with the film. I didn't hate it, nor did I love it. It was perfectly fine, but I haven't returned to it much over the past decade. I may have seen it 3 more times. It never had the appeal of rewatching it like James Cameron's other flicks. I've lost count how many times I've seen Terminator 1 and 2, The Abyss and True Lies, etc. I think to many of us the desire for an Avatar sequel died out ages ago. If it came out around like 3 to 5 years after the first one, I think the public's desire and hunger for a sequel would be really high. But a lot has changed the past 13 years. The 3D boom has died out, there is far less movies being shown now in 3D, and for home viewing they no longer make 3D TVs. James Cameron isn't stupid and is fully aware of this, and probably has his own concerns about the extensive delay of a follow-up to his most successful film, and how well it might perform. I went into Avatar 2 with minimal expectations, but I hoped it would surprise me. Firstly, the visual effects are incredible, as you might expect. James Cameron has a clear vision and is making use of the most talented people in the industry and using the latest technology, so it looks stunning to look at, there is no doubt about that. When they released a trailer a few months back, some complained it looked just the same, not much of an improvement over the first one, but when you do see it, there is a big increase in detail, in particular the textures, and the lighting is very lifelike. I've not watched a 3D movie in a long time, and it was very effective in many of the sequences. For once the 3D didn't lose its appeal, or I forgot I was watching it in 3D. The camera angles and the way they incorporated the visual effects made the 3D illusion work well. But aside from all the lovely effects and the world Cameron and his artists have created, the story is most important, and that part is let down considerably. It basically takes the structure of the first film and repeats it. We have very similar plot beats. In the original, Jake is trained to be a Na'vi, and in the sequel it's the kids doing the same thing but with a new tribe, and the story mainly focuses around them. And the villain played by the awesome Stephen Lang has returned. Come the third act, you have a similar battle, not in the air but by sea. To be fair on it, the action is really well executed. James Cameron still has a talent for staging impressive action sequences. However, the dialogue is pretty basic throughout, making it come across as a film designed for children. It's not complicated or deep. It has a very simple message of protecting the sea life and the creatures that reside in it, which is fine, but it doesn't warrant its 3-hour plus runtime for its wafer-thin story. The film has 5 writers on it, which is crazy, but it comes across as maybe a first or second draft of a script that clearly needs a lot more work. You do spend a lot of time, especially come the second act, just underwater looking at the effects, as the film comes to a halt for you to just look at things. It's all lovely stuff and the 3D is great, but in 2D and later down the line on home viewing, I can imagine this being pretty boring and a slog to sit through. The film has a little bit more humour to it, and there is certainly some strong emotional moments in it. It's not completely inept when it comes to those beats in the story, but it all seems so familiar, but you just have a different location. I suppose this is the old complaint made many times over the years when critiquing sequels, when they do the same thing, but considering the lengthy wait for a follow-up, it seems very lazy. I honestly expect far better from James Cameron, who has such a fantastic track record. As the amazing composer James Horner is sadly no longer with us, Simon Franklin has taken on the duties of composing the score to The Way of Water. Simon had previously worked with both Cameron and Horner as a record producer and arranger since Titanic, and is signed on to compose the remaining sequels. Thankfully, Simon brings back the themes James Horner created, which is great. I hate that with sequels where they drop all the themes come the follow-up. The Marvel Universe has a major problem with that, messing up continuity. The score to The Way of Water is really good, thankfully. Some superb action cues, and for when the kids are training to breathe underwater, it really helps sell the visuals and the world of Pandora. It's a proper old school magical score, something you find in 80s fantasy films, so to speak. So yes, it certainly impressed me. Overall, it's a 3 out of 5 movie, but you have to see it in 3D. If you opted for a 2D showing, I would give it 2 out of 5. It gets an extra point for its 3D efforts, but outside of that, it's a bland story with weak dialogue that is more focused on its world building than actually giving you a deep story to sink your teeth into. All the performances are really good, I don't fault the actors at all, they are just given clumsy and often forgettable dialogue to deliver. Cameron is more focused on pushing the tech as far as he can to give you a special cinematic experience, which is fine for an amusement park attraction, but for an entire movie, you are going to need a story that keeps you engaged, and not just leaving it to the visual effects to do all the work. If you would compare it to the first one, I think the first film is better, despite that having a somewhat of an unoriginal story. Avatar 1 has more going on, with a clear start, middle and end. Having the jungle setting is more interesting visually than being underwater. After an hour or so with deep sea diving in the sequel, you kind of get bored of it. The Way of Water leaves it open for a sequel and is designed to set up more stories, but what it is setting up is kind of unclear, and what they are attempting to do doesn't seem to warrant 3 more sequels. I'm sure it will do well financially. It's difficult to imagine it outperforming the original though, but for me personally, I'm just not that invested in the world of Pandora. Once Cameron gets over his obsession with this alien world, which could be in another 10 years, I hope he returns to something smaller in scale and really focuses on a story that brings something new to the table and doesn't rely so heavily on CGI and 3D effects to cover up the shortcomings of his script. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and click the bell to be notified of my latest retrospectives and reviews. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain early access to my content and exclusive videos, then follow the link below.